Chapter 13. Mr. Marvel discusses his resignation. Chapter 13 of the book introduces Mr. Marvel, the character who discovers the Invisible Man's secret. In this chapter, Mr. Marvel is depicted hastily walking towards Bramblehurst at twilight, carrying 3 books and a bundle wrapped in a tablecloth. Throughout his journey, the voice of the Invisible Man accompanies him, warning him not to try to escape again or face the consequence of being killed. Mr. Marvel explains that his intention was not to escape, but that he got lost and was mistreated by the villagers. The Invisible Man expresses his frustration over the villagers finding out about his invisibility and stealing his books. Recognizing the need for Mr. Marvel's assistance, he threatens him in order to ensure his compliance. Despite feeling weak and fearful, Mr. Marvel conveys his discontent with the situation and even expresses a desire for death, as he believes he has the right to object. However, the Invisible Man forces him to continue walking while firmly holding his shoulder. As they approach a church in the village, the Invisible Man instructs Mr. Marvel to proceed straight through without causing any trouble. The chapter concludes with Mr. Marvel walking through the village and eventually disappearing into the darkness. Chapter 14. At Port Stowe. In Chapter 14, Mr. Marvel is discovered sitting outside an inn in Port Stowe, looking exhausted and anxious, with his hands buried in his pockets. An elderly mariner approaches him and strikes up a conversation about books and newspapers. The mariner mentions a remarkable story he read in the newspaper about an invisible man. Marvel becomes uneasy as he is aware of the Invisible Man and his escapades. The mariner proceeds to share the details from the newspaper story, describing the Invisible Man's presence in Iping, his ability to be invisible, and his chaotic escape. Marvel pretends to doubt the story, dismissing it as a hoax. He tries to change the subject, but eventually admits that he has knowledge of the Invisible Man from undisclosed sources. Marvel uses his toothache as an excuse to avoid further inquiries from the mariner. He abruptly departs, leaving the mariner feeling fooled. However, the mariner witnesses money floating in the air, which prompts him to believe Marvel's account of the Invisible Man. The chapter concludes with the mariner realizing how close he unknowingly came to the Invisible Man. He recollects that the Invisible Man had taken money from various places, ultimately ending up in Marvel's pockets without anyone pinpointing him as the culprit. Chapter 15. The Man Who Was Running. In Chapter 15, Dr. Kemp is in his study, engrossed in his scientific research. Suddenly, his attention is drawn to a small figure hastening towards him at an astounding speed over the hill. Initially dismissing the figure as just another hurried individual, Dr. Kemp soon realizes that something is amiss as he sees the man's terror-stricken expression. This distress is not confined to the man alone, as the people on the street also notice his fear and become alarmed themselves. The man's frantic sprint through the town incites panic among its residents, who scramble for cover and raise the alarm that the Invisible Man is approaching. The man's terror proves infectious, plunging the town into chaos as everyone tries to safeguard themselves from the unseen menace of the Invisible Man. Chapter 16. In the Jolly Cricketers. Chapter 16 of the book takes us to the Jolly Cricketers Inn. The locals have gathered there when suddenly Marvel, the man who had encountered the Invisible Man earlier, bursts in, terrified and seeking refuge. Marvel warns everyone that the Invisible Man is after him and desperately asks for their help. The locals, including a barman, cabmen, and policemen, try to comprehend the situation and assist Marvel. As Marvel frantically attempts to hide and secure the doors, chaos ensues. The Invisible Man shows up, causing panic among the patrons. He smashes through the bar, parlor door, and the locals struggle to apprehend him. The Invisible Man fights back fiercely. During the scuffle, he manages to escape through the kitchen while the locals take shots at him with a revolver. After a brief exchange of gunfire, the Invisible Man disappears, leaving the shocked locals in search of his body. The chapter concludes with a man sporting a black beard proposing the use of a lantern to aid in their search for the Invisible Man's body.